My parents said they couldn't take care of my twins while I had emergency surgery because they had plans with my sister. We're not canceling our concert for that, they said. I hired a nanny from the hospital, cut all contact with them, and stopped helping them financially. 2 weeks later, they showed up. I never thought a normal day could turn into such a nightmare so quickly. It all started on a Tuesday morning when I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen that left me unable to move. At first, I thought it was something temporary, maybe something I ate, but the pain wouldn't go away. My twins, Lucas and Sophia, age 5, were playing in the living room, laughing and running around as usual. I tried to stay calm for their sake, but when the pain became unbearable, I knew something was seriously wrong. Since I lost my husband, Diego, 3 years ago in a car accident, I've learned to manage on my own. It hasn't been easy raising 2 young children while working as a nurse in a local hospital, but I've always done my best to ensure they lack nothing. My parents live a few streets away from my house, and although our relationship isn't perfect, I always thought I could count on them in an emergency. That day, as the pain made me break out in a cold sweat, I called them. Mom, I need you to come take care of the kids. Something's not right. I think I had to go to the hospital, I said, trying to sound calm even though I was terrified inside. My mom, Clara, answered in that tone I knew all too well, the one she used when something inconvenienced her. Oh, honey, we can't today. We have plans with your sister. We're going to a concert tonight. We've been looking forward to this for months. We can't just cancel. I went silent for a second, thinking maybe I hadn't explained the situation clearly. Mom, this isn't just any favor. I'm really bad. I can barely walk. It's an emergency. But my mom brushed it off. Well, it's not like you're dying, right? Call someone else, a neighbor or something. We've already got everything planned with Laura. Laura, my younger sister, has always been my parents' favorite. It's not something I like to admit, but it's the truth. Since we were kids, everything revolved around her. If Laura wanted something, my parents would move heaven and earth to get it for her. Me, on the other hand, I was always the one who had to understand and figure things out on my own. But this was different. I wasn't asking them to cancel a coffee date with friends. I was asking for help from my kids while I faced something that could be serious. Mom, please, I insisted, my voice trembling. I have no one else. The kids can't be left alone. Then I heard my dad, Roberto, in the background. We're not canceling our concert for this. Call a babysitter or something. Don't be so dramatic. Those words hit me like a knife. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents, my children's grandparents, were putting a concert above my health and the safety of Lucas and Sophia. I hung up the phone without saying another word because if I kept talking, I would have said things I'd later regret. The pain was getting worse, so I called an ambulance. While waiting, I dragged myself to the living room and explained to kids in the calmest voice I could muster that Mommy had to go to the doctor, but everything would be okay. Their worried little faces broke my heart. I didn't want to leave them, but I had no choice. At the hospital, the doctors ran several tests and discovered I had acute appendicitis. I needed emergency surgery that same night. I was alone, scared, and all I could think about was my kids. With no one else to turn to, I used my phone from the hospital bed to find a babysitter. I found an agency that offered last-minute services, and after a quick call, I arranged for a woman named Marta to come to my house in less than an hour. I didn't know her, but the agency had good reviews, and I had no other option. As they prepped me for surgery, I couldn't get my parents' words out of my head. We're not canceling our concert for this. As if my life, the lives of their grandchildren, meant nothing compared to a night of fun. I always knew we weren't their priority, but this was a whole new level of indifference. The surgery went well. Thank God. When I woke up in the recovery room, the first thing I did was call Marta to make sure the kids were okay. She told me they were asleep, had eaten, and everything was fine. I felt immense relief, but also a rage I couldn't control. My parents hadn't even called to check on me. Not a single message, nothing. That was the moment I made a decision. I couldn't keep relying on people who didn't care about me or my kids. For years, I had been the one always there for them. When they needed money to pay a bill, I was there. When my dad had car troubles, I paid for the repairs. When my mom wanted to go shopping, I gave her money, even when it left me with nothing. But that was over. I wasn't going to keep helping them. Not after this. I decided to cut off all contact with them. I didn't want to talk to them, see them, or have them be part of our lives anymore. I changed my phone number from the hospital, blocked their contacts, and asked Marta not to let anyone into the house while I was gone. It was an easy decision, but it felt right. My kids and I deserve better. I spent 2 days in the hospital before being discharged. When I got home, the kids ran to hug me, and for a moment, all the pain and anger melted away. Marta had done an incredible job taking care of them, and I paid her double what she asked for because she truly deserved it. But even though I was happy to be back with my kids, I couldn't shake what had happened. I knew cutting contact with my parents wouldn't be the end of the story. I knew them too well. 2 weeks later, just as I was starting to feel a bit more normal, someone knocked on the door. I looked out the window, and there they were, my parents, standing at the entrance with faces that suggested something was wrong. I didn't open the door right away. I stood there, watching them, wondering what the hell they wanted now. Part of me wanted to ignore them, close the curtains, and pretend I wasn't home. But another part, the one that still remembered when we were a family, told me I at least had to hear what they had to say. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "What do you want?" I asked in a cold tone I barely recognized. My mom looked at me with teary eyes. "Honey, please, we need to talk. You can't keep ignoring us like this." My dad, who was usually the loudest, stayed quiet, staring at the ground. For the first time in a long time, he didn't seem to have anything to say. "Now you want to talk?" I said, crossing my arms. "Where were you when I needed you? When your grandchildren needed you?" I didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them back into my life so easily. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure I could ever forgive them. It had been 2 weeks since I decided to cut off all contact with my parents, and though it wasn't easy, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. The first few days were tough. Lucas and Sophia kept asking why their grandparents weren't coming to visit, and I had to come up with simple excuses like they were busy. I didn't want to burden them with the truth. Not yet. They were too young to understand the kind of abandonment we had experienced. But in my mind, everything was clear. My parents had chosen a concert over my health and the safety of my kids, and that was unforgivable. That day, when they knocked on the door and I saw them standing there, I knew I couldn't avoid the confrontation any longer. I opened the door, but didn't let them in. I didn't want them in my house, not after what they'd done. I stood in the doorway with my arms crossed, waiting to see what they had to say. My mom was the first to speak, with that shaky voice she used when she wanted me to feel bad for her. "Honey, please, we need to talk. You can't keep ignoring us like this. We're your family." "Family?" I repeated, almost laughing at how absurd it sounded. Where was my family when I needed them? When I was on a hospital bed, about to go into surgery, begging you to take care of my kids? My dad, who had been silent until then, looked up. "It's not fair that you're doing this to us." That day was important for Laura. We couldn't let her down. "Important for Laura?" I said, feeling the anger rise in my chest. "Explain that to me, because I don't get it. What was so important about a concert that it was worth more than my life or your grandchildren's?" My mom sighed, as if I was the one who didn't understand. It wasn't just a concert. Laura had won a contest months ago to meet her favorite singer after the show. It was a special day for her, something she couldn't miss. We couldn't ruin that for her. I stared at them, unable to believe what I was hearing. So, a meet and greet was more important than the fact that I needed emergency surgery? That my kids were going to be left alone, and I couldn't find anyone to take care of them? "Don't be so dramatic," my dad said in that authoritative tone. He always used to shut down arguments. "In the end, everything turned out fine, didn't it? You hired a babysitter, you had your surgery, and here you are. Nothing serious happened." "Nothing serious?" My voice cracked, not from sadness but from fury. I had to find a stranger from a hospital bed while in so much pain I could barely think. Why did my own parents turn their backs on me? And you didn't even call to see if I was alive or dead. That's not nothing serious. That's not caring at all. My mom tried to step closer, reaching out as if to touch me, but I took a step back. Honey, don't say that. Of course we care about you, but Laura needed that moment. You've always been strong, always managed. She's not like you. Those words were the final blow. For years, I'd heard the same thing, that I was a strong one, the one who could handle everything, while Laura was a fragile one who needed attention. But this time, I wasn't going to let them manipulate me with that excuse. I'm done being your lifeline, I said, looking at both of them. For years, I gave you money, helped with your problems, took care of everything while you put Laura on a pedestal. But it's over. I'm not going to keep supporting you. I'm not going to keep pretending this is a family. You made your choice that day, and I made mine. My dad frowned. What are you saying? Are you going to leave us out on the street? We can't survive without your help. Figure it out, I replied without a hint of doubt. I managed on my own in a hospital with 2 young kids, and no one support me. Now it's your turn. Before they could say anything else, I closed the door in their faces. I heard my mom sobbing and my dad banging on the door a couple times, but I didn't open it. I leaned against the door, taking deep breaths until they left. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was protecting what really mattered, my kids and my peace. A week later, my phone rang with an unknown number. I don't usually answer those calls, but something told me to pick up. It was Laura. "Hey, little sister," she said in that sarcastic tone she always used when she wanted to get under my skin. "What's wrong with you? Why are you being so dramatic with Mom and Dad?" "I'm not being dramatic," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I'm just living my life without them." Laura laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. "Yeah, sure. Thanks to your tantrum. They're making me get a job to pay the bills." "Me working? Do you realize how ridiculous this is? It's all your fault." For a second, I almost felt bad. Laura had never worked a day in her life. My parents had always supported her, and when they couldn't, I was the one who paid. But then I remembered what had happened, and the guilt turned into something colder. "Figure out, Laura," I said bluntly. "After the way you 3 treated my twins, I don't want to see you or them ever again." I hung up before she could respond. I didn't want to hear more excuses, more complaints, or more attempts to make me feel guilty. I'd had enough. 2 days later, I went out with my friend Carla, a nurse from the hospital who had always been there for me. I needed to clear my head and talk to someone who wouldn't judge me. We went to a small cafe near my house, a quiet place where we could sit, have coffee, and chat. We sat near the window, and as we looked at the menu, I saw a waitress approaching. When I looked up, I froze. It was Laura. She glared at me with contempt, as if I were the last person she wanted to see. I had never seen her work, not even something as simple as waiting tables. She always thought she was too good for that. But there she was, wearing an apron and holding a notepad. "What do you want?" she asked in a tone so dry it practically spat the words. Carla ordered a cappuccino, but I couldn't resist the opportunity. "I'll have a latte," I said with a mocking smile. "And make it quick, please. I don't have all day." Laura pressed her lips together and scribbled the order without a word. I watched her head to the counter, and for a moment, I felt a small satisfaction. Maybe it was petty, but after everything that had happened, seeing her like that felt like a kind of justice. When she returned with the coffees, I noticed she was looking at me differently, with a slight smile, almost as if she was plotting something. She placed Carla's cappuccino on the table carefully, but when it was my turn, she didn't give me a chance to react. She lifted my cup and, without warning, threw the hot coffee in my face and on my clothes. "This is for making me work, you idiot!" she screamed as the liquid burned my skin. The pain was immediate, a searing burn that made me scream and jump out of my chair. The cafe erupted into chaos. People turned to look. Some stood to help, others just stared with their mouths open. Carla leapt from her seat, yelling at Laura to stop, but my sister was already out of control, insulted me as she tried to come at me again. A cafe worker, a young guy with tattoos on his arms, ran over and grabbed her by the shoulders, pulling her away from me. "That's enough," he shouted, holding her as she struggled. I could barely see, with coffee dripping down my face and the pain making me gasp. Carla grabbed my arm and took me to the bathroom to clean up, but the burning wouldn't stop. Someone called an ambulance, and before I knew it, I was on my way back to the hospital. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, all I could think about was Lucas and Sophia. I called Marta from the ambulance, begging her to take care of the kids again. Thankfully, she agreed without hesitation. At the hospital, they treated me for minor burns on my face and chest. They weren't severe, but they hurt like hell, and the humiliation burned almost as much as my skin. I couldn't believe Laura had gone this far, that her hatred for me had driven her to attack me like this. But one thing was clear, whatever was left of our family was dead, and this time there was no going back. The days after the cafe incident were an emotional whirlwind. The burns on my face and chest healed slowly, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the fury and betrayal I felt inside. Laura had crossed a line I never imagined anyone in my own family could cross. Throwing hot coffee in my face in front of everyone wasn't just an attack. It was a declaration of absolute contempt. And though part of me wanted to let it go, as I had always done with my family's issues, this time I couldn't. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. When I left the hospital, the first thing I did was call a lawyer named Javier, a serious but kind man I'd met years ago at the hospital when he was working on a case involving a patient. I explained everything. The emergency surgery, my parents' refusal to watch my twins, cutting off contact, and finally Laura's attack at the cafe. Javier listened quietly, taking notes, and when I finished, he looked at me with a mix of disbelief and determination. "This is a clear case of assault," he said, adjusting his glasses. "With witnesses, the cafe security footage, and your medical records showing the burns, we can file charges for assault and minor injuries. Your sister could face a fine or even jail time, depending on the judge. Are you sure you want to move forward?" I didn't hesitate for a second. "Yes, I'm tired of her and my parents thinking they can walk all over me without consequences. I want justice." Javier nodded and promised to start working on the lawsuit immediately. He warned me not to talk too much with my family before the trial, as anything I said could be used against me. "Stay out of it," he said. "Let me handle this." I trusted him, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was on my side. A few days later, while I was at home taking care of Lucas and Sophia, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but when I answered, I heard my mom's shaky, reproachful voice. "Honey, how could you do this to your own sister? We found out you're suing her. Are you crazy?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but I felt the anger boiling up again. Ask Laura why she threw hot coffee in my face in the middle of a crowded cafe. Ask her why she left me with burns and screamed that it was my fault she had to work. "That's what happened, Mom." There was silence on the other end. And then I heard my dad's harsh voice, the one he always used to assert himself. "Laura told us you provoked her, that you went to that cafe to mock her, to humiliate her because she had to get a job. She was just defending herself. That was too much." "Provoked her?" I shouted, losing control. I went to have coffee with a friend. I had no idea she worked there. And when I saw her, yeah, maybe I made a sarcastic comment, but that doesn't justify her attacking me like a lunatic. You always defend her, always believe her version. But this time there are witnesses, there are cameras, there's evidence. You can't cover up what she did. My mom tried to interrupt, her voice breaking. "But she's your sister. You can't send her to jail for this. We're family. You have to forgive her." "No," I said sharply. "Family doesn't mean letting people hurt me over and over again. Family doesn't mean abandoning my kids when I need you and then attacking me for standing up for myself. I'm done, Mom. I don't want to hear any more." Before they could say another word, I hung up. My heart was pounding, and for a moment I felt bad, like I'd been too harsh. But then I remembered Javier's words. Don't talk to them. Don't let them manipulate you. I had to protect my case. But more than that, I had to protect myself and my kids. I blocked the number they'd called from and decided I wouldn't answer if they tried again. The trial came a few weeks later. I was nervous, but Javier had prepared me well. I sat in the courtroom with Lucas and Sophie at home with Marta, and I looked at Laura across the room. She was with the public defender, and my parents were sitting behind her, glaring at me like I was the villain in this story. I didn't let it intimidate me. There was too much at stake. The trial was quick. Javier presented the evidence. The cafe security footage clearly showing Laura throwing the coffee at me without any physical provocation on my part. The testimonies of Carla and the worker who restrained her, and my medical report showing first-degree burns on my face and chest. Laura's lawyer tried to argue that I had provoked her verbally, but the judge wasn't buying it. The video clearly shows the defendant acting disproportionately and with premeditation, said the judge, an older man with a firm voice. A verbal provocation, if there even was one, does not justify a physical assault that causes harm. The evidence is clear. When the verdict came, I felt a knot in my stomach. Laura was found guilty of assault and minor injuries. The sentence: 1 year in prison with the possibility of reduction for good behavior, and a small fine she'd have to pay when she got out. She started crying in the dock, and my parents stood up, yelling at the judge that it was unfair, that I was to blame for everything. But the judge banged his gavel and silenced them. As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was satisfied. Laura had always gotten away with everything, always been a spoiled one who never faced consequences. This time, she didn't. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel a bit of sadness, not because I regretted it, but because this marked the definitive end of what was once my family. But that sadness didn't last long. Deep down, I knew it was the right thing. When I got home that afternoon, I took my phone out of my bag and saw I had 12 missed calls from an unknown number. It didn't take a genius to know it was my parents. Probably wanted to yell at me, beg me, or blame me for what happened to Laura. But I had no intention of answering. I blocked the number, as I had before, and set the phone on the table. I didn't want any more of their drama in my life. I went to the kitchen, made a cup of coffee, and sat on the couch with Lucas and Sophia. They were playing with building blocks, laughing and arguing over who could make the tallest tower. I watched them and felt a calm I hadn't felt in a long time. I had been through so much in the past few weeks. The surgery, my parent abandonment, Laura's attack, the trial. But there I was with my kids, and that was all that mattered. As I took a sip of coffee, I thought about everything I had learned about my family. My parents had never been the loving grandparents my twins deserved. They had always put Laura first, even when it meant leaving me alone in my darkest moments. And Laura, she had shown herself to be selfish and violent, someone who would rather blame me than take responsibility for her mistakes. For years, I had tried to keep that relationship alive out of a sense of duty, the idea that family was sacred. But now I saw the truth. They weren't my family. My family was Lucas and Sophia, and the people like Marta and Carla, who had been there when I needed them most. The phone buzzed once more on the table, but I didn't even look at it. I let the sound fade into the laughter of my children. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. It wasn't a perfect peace. There were still scars, both physical and emotional. But it was enough. I had faced my demons, set a boundary, and won. And for me, that was a victory worth more than anything my family could ever offer.